I'm not mysterious at all. I just feel like using much of my time on explaining who I am isn't really worthwhile, when we actually should be talking about the thing that we all should care for, which is basically in this session, testing. And we should care for that, basically because the way we work, generally, at F-Secure, or pretty much in any companies, is that in the center of all of this is that we have smart people who will somehow make changes to whatever code base we have available. They will hopefully talk to other smart people. And when they make those changes, there's this mysterious CI/CD pipeline thingy. You know, it's a thing that everyone should have these days. You should almost expect to have it. If you don't, please build one. And you know, when you make those changes into your code, they just magically appear to whoever your customers are. In the case of F-Secure, and in the case of my own team, I'm not really working on React. I was kind of laughing at the idea of like, I'm not sure what I should talk about here because I don't really work on React. I get to work some on Angular. I get to work some on Vue.js. I get to fight about React a lot. And I get to talk about the love of React that a lot of people have. But it's just not something that I do. What I instead do is I work on Windows applications mostly right now. And when we talk about customers, users, we talk in the scale of some millions. So whenever there's a piece of code that somebody writes, it gets deployed on people's personal machines around the globe in millions. So it's kind of evident that, you know, testing has some role to play in it, even if I don't draw it actively in the picture. It's kind of everywhere, not just part of the pipeline of making sure things work even in the end. And a lot of times, you know, when we look at this testing that we need to perform, the CI/CD stuff that we talked about in the previous talk, it is a big part of what we keep on talking about. We need all kinds of things in our CI/CD pipeline. It's not just automating the creation of the builds, but we need to automate a lot of the testing that happens on those builds as well. We need to have unit tests that keep on running. We need to make sure, you know, that we get the feedback from those tests. We need to have integration tests, different kinds of APIs. We might have some kind of system level tests. Maybe we want to test something through a GUI, whatever it is that you're building. There's going to be many different layers. And obviously, you will need different tools for each of these layers. And then on the top of it, like a cake here as an icing, sometimes people draw this as an ice cream cone, saying this is an anti-pattern now if you have very little unit tests there. On top of the cake is this, they call it manual exploratory testing. And I actually wanted to talk mostly about this manual exploratory testing because I believe that the cake icing there on top is actually what makes a difference in whether your tests, automated tests, are going to be useful at all in the scales that we're doing, actual live programs for a great number of users. So I've been a tester for 25 years. I am also a programmer. I for a while forgot that I've been programming since age of 13. Only so far 16 languages. So again, like, you know, I don't really care about what the language is so much. I care about the problems that we're solving with the code that we're creating. And I identify very strongly as an exploratory tester. So looking at the previous slide, I am a manual exploratory tester. That's what I do most of my life. And, you know, since that's what I do is I look at an application, whatever product that I'm working with, and I think of it as my external imagination. As in, it talks to me. It tells me what to enter, what to click, what to try, what to do twice, what to do 5 times, what to do slowly, what to do fast, and all these things. And it tells me those things because I've spent enough time with different kind of applications and looked at different kinds of technologies. Just, you know, recognizing what the technology is, it also gives you hints. The applications speak to us. And, you know, you should learn to listen to those. So I wanted to show you kind of a brief demo. Unlike everyone else, I'm going to do a live demo. So I wanted to show you a little bit of exploratory testing, just, you know, a few minutes worth of it, on what does it actually look like when you're doing it. So I have a little bit of an application here. It's a warehouse management system. It's called Gilded Rose. Has anyone ever done a Gilded Rose kata? No one? Someone? A couple of people there in the back? Gilded rows it's basically a warehouse management system where, kind of like if you think of a store where you have these tags, like Toys R Us used to have these tags that automatically would update to the price of the day. You can imagine it kind of like a system like that, where you have a name of an item, you have the days, how many days you're going to be selling it, and you have some kind of a value for it. So it's a very simple system. It has some requirements as well. So I put here requirement specifications. I do not expect you to read them. It basically says that there's these 3 kind of values and, all kinds of business rules. And having played with this a little bit, I remember most of these rules right now by heart, so I don't need this all the time. So let's look at the Java version of Gilded Rows. So Gilded Rows implementation, it is 60 lines of code, not a huge number of lines. And for testing this, I might just as well read the code. That's what an exploratory tester does, obviously. If you need to understand how things work, why actually rely on any third-party source? Because if the code and whatever people say disagree, who's going to win? Obviously the code. Whatever is in your product that you're testing, that's going to be the winning thing. I have also, from Emily Bach, who's created this, I have a sample test. If I put in something called something, an item named something, with a selling time of 0 days and a value of 0, it's going to say that it gives me 2 zeros back for the quality and selling. And I can just run this to see that, okay, fine, this seems to be the case. So to explore this, all I need to start doing is, copy-pasting or creating some kind of a way of doing this in a bit more automatic way. So again, I can explore whatever is given to me. And my choice of exploring is that I'm moving to a different tool. This is called approval testing, approval tests. And it's the exact same test. You give in inputs of something 0 and 0. We know that we're supposed to get out 0 and 0 based on the other test that we just run. But the difference with this tooling and why it is so nice for exploration is that it gives me very small text that I can't actually scale, some choice of tooling. If I put in something 0 and 0, I get out something 0 and 0, which matches what I expected. And now that I have seen what it gives me, I can just approve it. I can have it available. And run it again. So now I have one test. So I have all kinds of things in my specification, and I'm exploring this. So I'm, first usually what I would like to know is, can it work? 0 and 0 sound like a, very symmetrical test case. Like I don't even know if the values go into the right fields. They might be intertwined. How would I know? Like I could start reading the code, but you saw what a mess the code was. I really do not care for that, at least not today. And instead, what I could say, let's give me some other numbers, and let's make sure that those numbers are not symmetrical. So I just add some more test cases. And since this approval testing combinations is running combinatorics of all the things that I give to it, I get to see that, okay, fine, so if I give these values, I get values of 0 and 5, it gives me back 0 and 5, or 0 and 3, and for 9 it goes down to 4. And again, knowing the specification, close to the end date, it's supposed to go down twice as fast. All of this makes sense to me. But also, I have another oracle, a way of knowing that this is correct, which is basically that my developer said this works in production. It's already there. They just asked me to test it, kind of get a feel of it before we make any changes. And no changes have been made yet. So if it works in production, even if it worked incorrectly, it doesn't really matter necessarily. Maybe we want to keep that incorrect functionality. But I can explore this and figure out, again, more tests that I can add to my thing. So I can add whatever values I feel like I need. So maybe I want something negative on both of these lists. Negative always sounds like a good thing. There were, for selling days, I remember from the specification, there were some things around number 4. There were some things around number 10. 11 and 9. So I'm just gonna, choose some values that I feel that I need to look at. And of course, I'm much more in control if I do one by one. This is gonna generate quite a number of things now for me. So I have now 24 test cases. And again, I could, review all of those, compare them to the specification, get a better feel of how does it actually work. Are all the claims true or not? But for brevity, I will choose to just say all of these new things works as coded, legacy code, works as my oracle. Let's just get it on the tests. I can also, every now and then when I'm exploring, I can just check on hey, what does it actually look like if I take a look at it from the perspective of code coverage? Yeah, sure, there's all kinds of things I don't cover. There's some kind of values 80 and 50 around quality that I definitely need to have. And there's something very fascinating here. I do not want to write that. Let's just take it in. And also simultaneously notice that, in the spec it says only backstage passes. So there's a shorthand. If I would try to test against the specification, it would actually mislead me in a little bit. Similarly, I had the values 50 and 80 that I could add. So again, adding more stuff, adding more test cases, and I am at, 60 so far. So a few minutes, I am with 60 test cases. I didn't review all of these results, but again, I can check what does it look like for the code. So yeah, I still have yellow. I don't really want to get to the 100% coverage right now. That's not the main thing that I want to be doing. What I actually want to be doing is thinking of okay, so I've been trying all these values, and clearly there's more values that I have to be going through. But are there any values that, a normal developer approaching this wouldn't think of? And one of those values would be something like this. Maybe you can put in binary. It's still an integer. Maybe you could put in hex. What it's supposed to do? Well, obviously, I don't have to think about that too much. I can just see what it does and see that, okay, yeah, sure, it's just a binary representation, kind of what I expected. So again, I can add it to whatever tests I have. And again, I have some 80 test cases there in total. So this is one of the examples of exploratory testing that I like showing to people a lot. And the reason is that while it is very much exploratory testing, it's also very much automation, right? You can explore with code, and actually it makes a lot of sense also to explore both with code and with the actual application. It's not either or, it's yes and. So what I showed is basically exploratory unit testing, the bottom layer of that pyramid that we were looking at, but in an exploratory, very manual fashion. I had to type in everything that I wanted to test today. Exploratory unit testing of legacy code, which if it works in production, even if it was incorrect, most likely none of my developer colleagues would want to fix it immediately because there's a risk of side effects, and nobody's complaining about it right now. I showed basically, my ideas of the world, binary, trying different kinds of things. My ideas of the specification, shorthand, different kinds of values, where are the limits, what kind of things make sense in this domain. And I showed code coverage that I was using while I was exploratory testing. Now no tools are out of the picture. And if I would be doing visual regression testing, it's not like I take two pictures and try to manually compare them. I know how to use a diff tool, even if I wanted to use specifically my eyes to pinpoint if the differences do matter. And that's what I keep on doing. We spent about 5 minutes on the demoing. So what I showed is actually really, really shallow exploratory testing. And if you would spend more time, you would probably learn more about the application. So normally, I get to spend my whole working days with an application, and I know pretty much about it, why it exists, what kind of things typically go wrong. And it makes me really powerful in guessing just the right path that I have to make sure that works, that just yesterday didn't work and surprised me. So a lot of this information learning is what we do while exploring. I don't really care much for the automation that I just wrote. I wasn't focusing on writing reusable automation. I just wanted to explore. I wanted to see what comes out of it. And I wanted to focus on whatever it was showing me that realistically, this is what it does. And comparing to whatever notes I had. So I could dispose of that automation. I can throw it away, but I don't have to. It doesn't take, even if I would do all the integers between -100 and +100, it doesn't take me more than a fraction of seconds to run all of those unit tests, because I can run them on the API level. And when it fails, if and when it fails, usually when it fails, I will see from my diff tool automatically popped up exactly the line of what was I putting in, what was changing, and I know in relation to whatever change we just made, if that actually makes sense. So disposable automation, but also test automation as documentation. It used to work this way. Tell me if anything changes. And a lot of this that I showed is really around using something as my external imagination. My hands on that keyboard, my active thinking while my hands are on that keyboard. That's what we call manual testing. But it is actually as manual as any programming task ever was. And yet we don't talk about manual programming. I don't need a user interface. I can have an API. I can have just a piece of code. And you can do the exact same thing. So for me, in 25 years, I realized that I've always been an exploratory tester. And at some point, the test automation started to, creep into the box that I call exploratory testing. They're pretty much the same thing to me. I don't see a difference anymore. But having colleagues that I love dearly, who look at things from another angle and start with programming first, not testing first, not the thinking aspect of testing first, they approach the very same box calling it all test automation. And what makes their test automation good, if and when it is good, is that within their box of test automation, they are doing good thinking around what needs to be tested. Because automatically generated expected values isn't what we're trying to do. We're trying to still figure out what are the right scenarios for us to test. So again, we have people coming to this testing problem from two different angles. I find that when I go to work, I never repeat myself. I don't do the same thing twice. So that's why I don't think of automation first. But there are colleagues of mine who come to work thinking of whatever they are, doing today, they will probably want to do again tomorrow or in a week. And everything starts with automation. And usually some mix and balance of these two is what we need. For me, the growth started from first being an explorer, then being more of an automation person, and then kind of just, realizing that it's all together just testing. And for me then, with that, the realizations that kind of came by is that automation, when somebody has written it, it gives me some reach for my exploration. It's actually a lot faster to do something 1,000 times when all you have to do is add a loop on a test case that already exists in an automated way. But you might again want to dispose of that instead of keep it in your CI/CD, even if you wanted to explore it with a particular change. When I write automation, I find that it's almost like a magnifying glass that I look at the application. I see things that I wouldn't see with a blind eye in the details. I notice problems that I could easily dismiss if I wasn't paying attention to the details. So it is the creation of automation that actually forces me to explore some of the details. And whenever automation fails, that is, like a calling call. Come here, Start exploring. Why did this fail? Is there an actual problem here? How relevant is the problem? How quickly can we pinpoint where the problem is? Or is it that the test that we were just using, that it's flaky? So again, exploration and automation are just the two sides of the same coin. So if you approach it from an automation angle, probably if you want to get any good at testing, you will figure out the exploration part, you will figure out what are the values that make sense, what are the things that you want to actually try automating for. There's plenty of automation out there, even in my particular organization, that does run, but finds very little problems, even though in the millions the users do still find the problems. So that is a problem that, or a thing that we need to still figure out and get better at, even though we work a lot with automation. And from this angle, it is really, the emphasis is really on the quality of our thinking. Our test automation code is only as good as the thinking that created it. And that thinking is called exploratory testing. So my 25 years, somebody else's 25 years, we've taken a different path. But there's this rule that in a group of this size, probably half of us have less than 5 years of experience, maybe not in a conference. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But industry doubles every 5 years. So, if we were representative of the industry as it is now, not everyone has 25 years of experience and have had time to dig into all of the details of both exploratory testing and automation that I have had time for. So perhaps these less than 5 years people will one end up starting one angle, the other end up starting another angle, and as a pair, they do a really great job. And this is what we find a lot of times with developers, developers who identify as developers and developers who identify as testers, pairing and working very closely in collaboration to get the ideas together and documented. So I wanted to share all of this because I believe that the quality and the testing that we end up getting into our CI/CD systems is really dependent on the quality of the thinking. It's done by the people, and whatever features we're developing, that's going to be making a difference. My favorite quote that I kind of want to end with is this idea that I've spent my 25 years of career not breaking software, but breaking people's illusions. We keep on thinking that things work until someone shows that they don't. So I wish everyone great time in whatever mechanisms of exploratory and automated testing in breaking illusions of yourselves and of your closest colleagues. Thank you.